Hey guys, Joe here from Their World Aquatics, brand new YouTube channel. Here we're going to show you guys how we did a 720 gallon aquarium build out. Tank measures 8 foot long, 3 feet front to back, and 4 foot tall. Tank's been up and running now for about 10-11 months. As you can see, it's filled with the peacock bass, about a 40-inch long fire eel, and a pair of weenie catfish that live way in the back. But what we're going to do is kind of take you back through a slideshow. A lot of photos here that we took through the years. It was one of the things that we purchased the tank, kind of sat around for a while. You know, life obviously gets in the way, just like everybody. Work, kids, chaos, you know, just the normal house chaos like everybody has. So, you know, as the months and the years kind of went by, we started playing with this thing little by little. One of the problems kind of in the beginning is we had noticed that when we did kind of a trial test run, we filled it up halfway full of water. It was kind of a gamble. You know, I bought it from a guy that's in central Ohio, and the thickness of the acrylic was only 7/8. But it was one of those stories where, it was in a church. It was up and running for a couple of years, and full of fish, no problems. But here I purchased it, brought it back, had it for a couple months, and eventually I thought, well, let's fill this thing with water. So I did that, got about halfway up, and that's when I realized, holy cow, this thing's got massive deflection. So the stand obviously was rough. We kind of tore it apart. The whole bottom was all rusted up. Great friend of mine, Don, welder, 40 plus years. We worked together on this, tore it all apart, mainly the bottom section, and re-welded on all new angle iron. With that, we also put on, for the first time, 8 adjustable jacks, which you'll see in time, which would, obviously make it so that we could put this thing exactly level. So we introduced, more 3x3 angle iron on the bottom, welded it, ground it, made everything absolutely perfect. And eventually we'd, bring it into the lower level of our house, aka the man cave. Started setting up, painted it, used some undercarriage paint, thinking, we wanted this thing to be protected from the elements, obviously. So sat there one night, obviously drinking a couple beers, sat there and painted this thing. There's a lot of angle iron, so it took a couple hours and a couple beers, but we got it done. So here you can actually see the stand is upside down, and you can see we welded on some gussets, and there's actually a nut that's on the back side of this corner here, and we welded this on, and obviously the bolt goes right through, and with that we actually can adjust the bottom of the stand. In this case, 8 different positions. It actually works out great. There's a lot of surface contact with the threads, grade 8 bolts, not a problem to be able to hold this weight. So by now the whole thing's painted, kind of somewhat in position, little by little, the weeks and the months go by, couple 10-15 minutes here, 10-15 minutes there, kind of playing with this thing. Now as you notice, there was actually some acrylic pieces there on the top, and those actually held the canopy system that was actually on like hydraulic arms. So you could lift up the left side or you could lift up the right side to give you access down inside the tank. Well, with those pieces of acrylic, obviously, we had to get those completely out of the way, because the concept was the top, which was only 1 inch thick, we were learning that we needed to make the top thicker. And as you saw a couple of slides before, we actually came across 2 pieces of acrylic that were, roughly 3 feet front to back, 4 foot long. And what we would do is we would take weld on 40, right there's a shot of it right there, and we would actually weld this on to the top of the existing acrylic, thus making the top 2.5 inches thick. So by doing this, the top of the tank would not deflect downward, which we had seen during the initial test. And by doing this, the center island overflow was actually protruding up from the middle of the tank because the back and the front panels were deflecting outward. So the theory was, make the top thicker and that'll stop the front and back from deflecting outward. It actually come from a pretty good resource, and I don't want to say bit the hook, but I bit the hook. If anything, it would make the tank stronger. The openings, which were originally 20 by 30 inches, we would reduce those down 28 by 18, and obviously with the smaller access holes working with the fish, it would make the top stronger. So here you're seeing actually a 180-gallon sump. This came from another deal, which was from a 900-gallon tank, which you're going to learn about in a couple videos downstream. So here the stand obviously is painted, plywood's starting to go on. There was a board there was on the back wall, and the concept came up with, I found this mirror, which just so happens to be 4 foot by 8 foot. Then I would take the mirror and put it on the back side of the tank, making the tank look double the thickness. Crazy concept, but I thought it'd be kind of cool. I picked up the mirror for $50. So here we're kind of prepping the scene, scrub the floor, paint the floor, just kind of hoping that, we all know what happens. You get water on the floor. It's bound to happen. So just kind of protecting the concrete, we did that. There you see the photo of the mirror in position. That was obviously a scary moment. This thing was probably 1/4 inch thick, but a couple buddies came over, we knocked it out. So the plywood obviously is getting cut. I'm going to put a piece of 3/4 plywood on the bottom, which will hold the filtration system. And then obviously on the top, it's going to have 2 layers of 3/4 plywood. And in time, we would slide a piece of 1/2 inch cushion between the plywood and the bottom of the tank. So here I'm just doing kind of a dry run, putting in the sump filtration system, 2 by 2 by 6, obviously 180-gallon sump. Came with the other transaction for the 900. And here I'm just kind of prepping the scene, trying to figure out, what's the best way to do the filtration system on this thing. Obviously a tank of this magnitude, we're going to have pipes and valves and check valves. I mean, it's going to be chaotic the way I want to design this thing. My theory was to have the main filtration system, obviously, and then a closed loop system, which you're going to see here in a little bit. So here you see the tank actually coming up onto the top of the stand, because now it's time to have the top welded on. So we actually took it from, my location, Northeast Ohio, and we drove this all the way out to Pennsylvania, where a company actually would prep the top and then take the 2 pieces of acrylic that I had, and then they would weld it on. And they actually took it and put it through a CNC machine and, cut the openings, beveled around the perimeter. Believe it or not, it actually came back. It was beautiful. So in these photos here, the top is actually welded on. It's done, and now it's obviously it's back home. We're prepping to raise the tank to slide a stand underneath. So that came a little tricky because there was a couple different layouts we had to do, because obviously as the tank rose up, I didn't have that much real estate between the top of the tank and the ceiling. So finally, after a couple little tweaks here and there with a pair of chain falls, slings underneath, we raised this bad boy right up. I wouldn't say the tank weighs too terribly much, maybe a couple 100 pounds, not for sure exactly. Probably closing in on 1,000 pounds, I'd say. So now the tank's in the air. We went ahead and slid the stand underneath and a pallet jack, and that worked absolutely perfect. There's some shim boards underneath of it, so they could, land the tank on the shims, pull the slings out, and then we just kind of lifted the tank up on one end, a couple of people slid the boards out, and down came the tank. So everything was centered up and good to go. Now, what you might not have seen was there was actually a hole drilled in the center of that plywood, right on the top of the stand, and that's where all the supply and return lines would come through. So one of the things I wanted to do way back in the beginning, I knew I wanted to do this. I wanted to drill 4 holes in each corner. I think I came off 6 inches by 6 inches on center line, and I dropped in the bulkheads. So these would be 1-inch bulkheads, and these would actually be the returns for the closed loop system. And because this tank was so tall, I wanted to have better circulation on the lower portion of the tank to really get things moving around. So with that, I measured, drilled right through the acrylic, and then actually underneath the, once I had the hole that went through the acrylic, I took that pilot hole and I went right through the plywood. And then I actually drilled upward with, I believe, a 3-inch hole saw, removing that plywood out of the way so that I would actually have room not only for the bulkhead to slide through, but obviously that the nut on the opposite side of the bulkhead, I needed real estate there to put that nut on. And then obviously, there'd be a nipple pipe there, and obviously the 90, and it would take off to the manifold for the closed loop. At the same token, I wanted to drill the top of the tank. There you can see now for the first time the 2.5-inch thick. I wanted 2 of my return lines to not only, obviously 3 of them were going to be coming back to the center outlet overflow, but I wanted 2 more return lines to come through the top of the tank, which in time would be connected to some C-swirls. Thanks guys for watching the video. Hit the link in the description below for video number 2. Till then, we're out.